I'm Samantha Eric alongside the one and only Brian Dunseth ahead of round one of the 2019 MLS Cup playoffs. Dunny, RSL took care of business on decision day, got the win in Vancouver. Other results went their way, and they find themselves in third place, hosting the Timbers on Saturday. Dunny, we've been a part of this journey from the beginning of the season. Certainly had its ups and downs. RSL finds itself home field advantage, third place. How did they get this done? What changes, improvements have you seen from this team March to now?
There's a couple things. I think first and foremost, for me, I go back to the CONCACAF Gold Cup break and the importance of kind of dialing it down, and the coaching staff very adamant and public with, we need to focus on the things that we started well with, and that was kind of defensive shape, defensive presence. We always talk about statistics, right? Goals for, assists, minutes played, impact plays, shutouts. But I think with regards to the way this team played in the second half of the season, it was mainly focused on a team collective, which I thought was really important and played into the identity of what Real Salt Lake has been and will continue to be as an organization. Now, the fact that they're in third place and a home field advantage, I think is a surprise in a lot of ways, but maybe also indicative of the way teams really fell off the side of a cliff in the second half of the season. I didn't think that heading into the last two games, we would see an LA Galaxy, for example, concede 8 goals against the same two teams Real Salt Lake played. I didn't think we'd see a Portland Timbers team who's coming in here to Rio Tinto Stadium struggle in the manner that they did and lose Brian Fernandez and potentially Diego Valeri in the process. And maybe more importantly, a San Jose Earthquakes team that was arguably an MLS Cup contender as we hit August, and then lose, what was it, 7, 8 games in consecutive fashion. So,
and a head coach in a bunch of those games.
And in the midst of this, all of the havoc that has been on the outside of this locker room, I think it speaks volumes to controlling an environment that you can control and letting everything on the outside kind of be this invisible shield. And I think that's maybe the most important thing about the way this group has come together. The growth of the young players, as well as this experienced veteran leadership, and all kind of perfect timing and winning the games ultimately that you're supposed to win.
I want to throw one stat at you, even though you said this is what everyone talks about, but 27 goals conceded in the first 14 games, just 14 goals in the last 20. That speaks volumes. What were they doing defensively? I know it's all about all the guys, the coaches, all talk about the collective effort, being tougher to break down, tough team to beat. What have you seen tactically on the field that's changed?
Well, I think we've seen more of an identity with the way that, you know, Freddie in particular has tried to really dial down. He and Tyrone have dialed down. And I try not to take away anything that Mike did, because what Mike Pecky had done, I think this group of coaches has really continued to build upon in their own way. I look at a clear-cut identity of who your preferred starting defenders are. And we know that when Everton, Luis, and Kyle are together, they're just such a great duo with kind of this teeter-totter balance of kind of the collective responsibility of how to match. And then an identity, whether you're talking about, you know, Sam up top, or Corey Barrett up top, or Damir Kreilach up top. We know Jefferson's always going to be on the right. We know that Albert, whether he's central or he's going to be on the left-hand side. I mean, there's such flexibility with this formation that I think ultimately everybody understood that in the Wild West, this firefight of a Western Conference, that if you are going to have any semblance of success, first and foremost, defensively you got to be sound. And I think that was what we saw in the second half of the season. And to your point, that's why those statistics are so telling.
You mentioned Portland likely without Brian Fernandez again. Questionable whether Diego Valeri is back healthy, ready to go. Given just the way that these two teams ended up heading into the postseason, who's in better form?
See, I have questions about Portland, right? Because you lose Brian Fernandez to SABH protocol, which is a huge hit because of the I mean, he's antagonistic and he's a goal scorer and he's just got this big brash personality and he's a guy that you just don't want to deal with. And then the potential of losing Diego Valeri, and we all know kind of the hubbub surrounding his contract status and what that looks like, and the calf injury and will he be available. But in the midst of losing your top two goal scorers and assists, I mean, those two, I think the stat line was either 17 goals and 12 assists or 19 goals and 12 assists. That was missing heading into that last match against San Jose, which was a must-win.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, guys like Abobasi, guys like Dairon Asprilla,
yeah.
who had a very minimal role, Andy Polo coming back in. We know Sebastian Blanco, who he is and what he means. So I guess, is it the disappointment of losing your two big heavyweights, or is it, hey, collectively we stepped up at the right time? It's a fine balance. I'm assuming Valeri's going to be available. That's what I'm assuming. I'm also assuming Fernandez is not going to be available. But I also know that without Fernandez, this is a Portland Timbers side that beat Real Salt Lake 2-1 through Sebastian Blanco, through Diego Valeri, and still shows collectively how dangerous they can be.
So you mentioned them beating us 2-1 here at Rio Tinto. They beat us by 1 goal in Portland. I think
should have been a draw.
Defense, I think the defense that we've talked about already from RSL really showed in that game on the road in Portland. So, third matchup. I like what interim head coach Freddie Juarez said to the media yesterday. He said it's really tough to beat a team 3 times. He even pointed to the LAFC situation last year. LAFC annihilated RSL here at the Riot. I think it was a home opener last year. Then beat them again when RSL was on the road. But hey, knockout round. RSL took the business. You've been in situations like that before. How hard is it to beat a team a third time?
It's really hard. And I think you could make the argument, despite losing those 2 games, that RSL was most definitely in both matches. And I think at a bare minimum could have drawn both matches. I mean, it's very simple misses that were the difference in those 6 points and the 6-point swing. You know, I think for RSL, it's almost as if you just have to be generally aware of what Portland's doing. But I almost want to see the cockiness of, we're home field advantage, right? We earn this. And that's what I want to see when the team takes the field on Saturday. I want to see a team that, regardless whether it's Sam or Dami or it's Corey Baird, whether Albert's playing centrally or Albert's playing on the side, there's a swagger and a confidence that I expect. Now, is it fair to assume that maybe Portland can be the bogey team in this conversation for RSL? Absolutely, because we know on any given day Portland can get results. They're a fighting team, but this is also smash that fly. This is also a team that I think in a lot of ways has it's weird. The psyche of playing all of these home games and having this distinct advantage of being home at Providence Park, unbelievable home field advantage, not leaving, I think almost took the edge off this team.
Yeah.
Because they weren't on the road. They weren't having to get up for a different environment. They weren't having to kind of collectively be together. They weren't sleeping in hotel rooms and being away from their family. I think that brings an edge to the travel component. Whereas being at home,
they got too comfortable.
It's getting comfortable. And by the way, everybody gets up for games in Portland. That's one of the easiest environments as a road team to get up for, which maybe is indicative of some of the performances and the results. But RSL just needs to have that swagger and that identity, and turning Rio Tinto into the fortress that I think in a lot of ways it has become more recently.
And so is there an X factor for you? Is there someone that you're watching for on this field that you think can be the difference in this game to help RSL move on to the conference semifinals?
I think for RSL, everyone's going to point to the big names, right? It's always going to be about the big names. It's going to be about the heavy hitters, the guys with the names on the back of the jerseys, the iconic faces. But I think in a game like this, set pieces, corners might be the big factor. We know guys like Everton and Kyle are just going to kick Diego Chara and back and forth. It's going to be a battle in midfield. That's the easy broad stroke. Who wins the midfield? Who wins the first ball? Who wins the second ball? Who can dominate possession? Who can be more effective in transition? But I think it comes down to kind of punishing the mistakes of the opponents and set pieces. Because notoriously, this is the time of year where there's just not a lot of clear-cut opportunities in the playoffs.
Let me ask you one more thing about this matchup.
Yeah.
So I spoke to Albert in Vancouver for our podcast, The 11, about just the hardest number 6 he's played against. He said it was Diego Chara, the combination of him and Guzman, who's no longer there. But Chara, the ground he covers, how do you go about minimizing his impact on the game. I think he often goes as the unsung hero of that team because you have a Valeri, you have a Blanco who are making the big plays, but you have Chara who, I mean, can single-handedly win a game for that team with his defensive and offensive input.
You know, I go back over the years and I think about Ozzie Alonso, Diego Chara, and Kyle Beckerman, and all having various degrees of success, right? They're all this kind of antagonistic approach with how they manage the game, how they balance the game, and maybe more importantly, how they physically impose themselves on a match. When I talk about Diego, I think the one thing that's always been impressive to me, the ground that he covers, like you said, but he's almost like this little Chihuahua ankle biter. He's just nipping at you the whole time, and you kind of like feel like you're just going to swat him away. And then all of a sudden, like he clatters you, and he's got this like 1,000-watt smile, like, oh, hey, I didn't really mean to, and he's just literally lopped your leg off. I think he is as important as Everton and Kyle are for Real Salt Lake. How do you minimize his effect? You know, offensively, I think he's underrated because he's kind of a connector. He's a shuttler. Defensively, you really can't unless your singular focus is to play around him to try to minimize his impact. If he's going to man mark Albert and Albert just goes and stands on the sideline, maybe that's the only way to do it. But what he brings to the table defensively is just heart, hustle, work rate. That's not going to go away.
All right, well, it's single elimination, win or go home until 2020. Dunny, prediction. What's your prediction?
Oh, God, I hate doing this. I would say RSL 2-1 at home.
All right, I'll take it. RSL hosting the Portland Timbers in round 1 of the 2019 MLS Cup playoffs. Be here at the Riot. If you haven't already gotten your tickets, rsl.com. Kickoff is at 8 p.m. Saturday, October 19th. If you can't make it to the Riot, although you should, you can watch on ESPN News. And if you get here, be sure to wear red. We are redding up this entire place. I don't know if that's a word, but
it's a red out.
Well, thank you. That's why you get paid the big bucks. Red out. See you there.